Pikmin 2. As a follow-up to the delightfully original Pikmin, this game expands upon that title, being much more vast in scale and bursting with great ideas. This is a wonderful example of how to design a sequel. But with that said, this is actually a pretty divisive entry. Not everything in Pikmin 2 is a straight improvement over the first, and several changes to gameplay and tone can turn away those who really adored the style of Pikmin 1. Depending on what you prize about this series, this will either be one of your favorite or least favorite Pikmin titles. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Please be aware that this review is based on the Wii version of Pikmin 2 with enhanced Wiimote control. Be warned that full spoilers for Pikmin 2 are on the table. The best. Number 1, improving on Pikmin 1. The best opportunity with a sequel is the chance to clean up the messier qualities of its predecessor, and let's just say, Pikmin 2 had a lot to work with. An enormous amount of improvements have been made to core issues from the first game, creating a far more user-friendly playing experience. And go figure, they're almost all related to keeping Pikmin alive. Pikmin pathing and AI has been greatly polished up. They find their way around much easier now, and no longer spread out as widely as they used to. They'll even clump together when passing over bridges. Tripping, one of the worst features of Pikmin 1, is tremendously reduced, and rarely ever happens now. A lot of Pikmin actions have been sped up. Growing, plucking, throwing, especially in succession, going in and out of the onions, and fortunately, taking down enemies. They're so much more responsive and efficient at everything, and because of this, you can approach combat with confidence. Enemies are more considerately designed. They all have simple and reliable strategies to be defeated without losing Pikmin, feeling a lot more fair. Between this, how much quicker Pikmin can deal damage, and the addition of purple Pikmin and the Ultra Sprays, battle is far more encouraged than in Pikmin 1. Taking down a beady Longlegs or Emperor Bullblacks, the difference is undeniable. These are some of the most dangerous bosses of the first title, and here they can be thrashed so quickly they'll die before they even start attacking. Pikmin also won't perish anymore if an enemy dies with one in its mouth, which never felt justified before. Swarming is now appropriately effective, since the dreaded mystery deaths of Pikmin 1 are no longer a problem. Despite being a much larger game, a no-death run of Pikmin 2 is, surprisingly, a lot more manageable. I'm also grateful bomb rocks are just an environmental hazard now, as they used to be cumbersome to use. Nectar goes a lot further now too, with a large number of Pikmin all being able to benefit from a single dose. Going over this, it's kind of hard to believe, but these improvements fixed every complaint I had for Pikmin 1. That's crazy. Number 2, expanding on Pikmin 1. Pikmin 2 fleshes out the original's formula, introducing a ton of new ideas to amplify its addictive gameplay. This is a much larger game, hosting at least 3 times the content and 201 individual treasures to collect. Areas are more diverse, with the overworld presenting different seasons, and caves usually having their own distinct theme, providing them a surprising amount of identity. Enemy types have also been tripled, and are weirder than ever, with some new non-lethal variants for more dynamic interactions. Bosses have been dialed up, in both difficulty and number, and they're a really satisfying capstone to cave exploration. The best part is you're almost always rewarded with useful upgrades for defeating them, a fitting new addition to the series. The new radar is fantastic for finding treasures, although its erratic noises can be a bit much at times. Since you always have 2 characters on the field now, multitasking is highly encouraged, and gives you more flexibility in managing your time. This is a huge advancement, adding an entirely new layer to planning and strategy. 2 new Pikmin types have been introduced, purple and white, both being tremendously useful, with purple Pikmin trivializing most enemies due to their paralyzing weight, and the white Pikmin being indispensable in certain situations for just how fast they are. Yellow Pikmin are immune to electricity now too, ensuring all 5 types have plenty of utility. It's worth calling out the bulb Pikmin, a strange new concept of parasitic Pikmin immune to most hazards, but only found in caves. It's pretty special coming across these for the first time. Sprays, while crazy busted, are a lot of fun to use, powering up your squad to take down enemies in seconds, or shutting enemies down entirely by turning them to stone. Pikmin 2 has some great side attractions as well, with a robust challenge mode of 50 different caves, asking you to use different loadouts of Pikmin to be completed. Some of these are so rudely designed they're rage-inducing, but this is a valuable inclusion and even supports multiplayer, as does 2-player battle, a wacky and fun battle mode you can get lost in for hours with a friend. I never imagined a versus mode of this nature would be so well suited to a Pikmin game. Number 3, caves. Here it is, the most divisive thing about Pikmin 2, caves. While they're called caves, these underground areas appear as a variety of interiors, set up as a series of floors. Each floor is randomly generated, while also including specific items, hazards, and enemies. And most importantly, there's no time limit during these segments. They're quite a change from the more natural areas of the overworld, and since each floor is randomized, there isn't a lot of intentional design throughout them. I'm not surprised these are a love it or hate it new addition. The benefit to random generation means you'll never quite have the same experience, which not only increases replayability, but keeps you more engaged since you won't know how things are laid out. Exploring these man-made settings is refreshing, and so is having all the time you want to do so. Despite this, the most challenging content of Pikmin 2 is relegated to these holes, but because of that, they're satisfying to complete, especially without losing Pikmin and grabbing everything along the way. The submerged castle has to be mentioned, as a notoriously demanding cave, asking you to move quickly to avoid the Pikmin steamrolling water wraith on each floor. It's an unsettling atmosphere in the best of ways. Caves thankfully save after every floor, so if something goes really wrong, you don't lose too much progress for reloading. Sometimes the random generation can give you a rough deal, but likewise, it can be really generous, letting you ignore most things on a floor. I also want to call out the Titan Dweevil, the final boss of Pikmin 2, a massive spider-like creature wielding all 4 elemental hazards. This is a superb final challenge for the scope of this game, and one of my favorite final bosses Nintendo's ever produced. Number 4, the Piklopedia and Treasure Hoard. If you love world building and collectibles, Pikmin 2 has you covered. The Piklopedia and Treasure Hoard are thorough menus detailing the enemies and items you've dealt with on the adventure, elaborating on the Pikmin world, and personal thoughts of Olimar, Louie, and even their ship. This is one of the best ways to catalog enemies I've seen in a game, allowing you to observe each of them in a contained environment, and you can even toss carrots to see how they might interact with Pikmin. These creatures are fascinating to watch firsthand, and Olimar even provides information about their biology and behavior, which highlights just how original a lot of these enemies are. Louie even offers hilariously mouth-watering recipes for each of them, and I mean it, he makes these sound delectable. The Treasure Hoard is likewise spectacular, letting you read notes written by Captain Olimar, attempting to figure out what a lot of these treasures are, sharing his thoughts on all sorts of topics, including life, family, work, Pikmin, and even his fears and dreams. The writing's surprisingly entertaining. In addition to the absurd names the ship comes up with for treasures, it also contributes humorous sales pitches, lending it plenty of personality. Yeah, these are both really worthwhile inclusions and satisfying to fill up, helping to present a more personable adventure. Number 5, a new approach. Pikmin 2's different from the first game in a lot of ways. Some of these differences can be seen as a step down, which I'll embellish more on later, but there are plenty of things to appreciate about the new style. Adventuring back to the Pikmin planet just to pay off a debt is certainly a novel premise, presenting a sillier, more lighthearted atmosphere than Pikmin 1. Louie's a quiet oddball, the president's bossy and incompetent, the ship thinks it knows better than everyone else, and even the emails you receive from family border on parody. There's no longer an overarching day limit, you can take as long as you want paying the debt. There's no real urgency to any of this, which does allow for a more relaxed experience, being a lot more inviting and flexible than its predecessor. As briefly as it's shown, it's cool to see Olimar's homeworld, and I'm particularly grateful the characters don't speak English. It's easier to feel immersed this way, with a few charming cutscenes that have aged well. Paying off the debt only to discover Louie's been left behind is a great lead into the second half of the game. Teaming up with the president and unlocking an entirely new area keeps the game from losing steam. There's still a lot to see. The credit sequence of Louie lost on the planet is delightfully surreal in its presentation, with a fairly emotional score to it, making this by far the closest Pikmin 2 gets to the whimsical atmosphere of the first. Talk about a robust selection of positives. Pikmin 2 clearly has a lot going for it. I didn't even mention how cool it is that a lot of these areas are from Pikmin 1, changed over time, or how lightning fast the loading times are in the Wii version. But as I've touched upon already, this is a divisive title, with several of these new ideas coming at the expense of some of the most memorable aspects of Pikmin 1. The worst. Number 1, Diminished Wonder. The first Pikmin is an emotional experience, striking a careful balance between wonder and unease that lingers in memory. Pikmin 2 has a much more quirky tone, rarely expressing the atmosphere of the original. This style isn't exactly a problem, it just doesn't stand up to the captivating ambience of its predecessor, failing to really encourage any kind of emotional engagement out of the player. Since the original's simple premise is so easy to get invested in, it's a noticeable contrast. The magic of feeling lost in an alien world is largely gone, and it's hard to really care about your reasons for returning here. The new music tracks don't help. While there are a few mystifying pieces, a lot of them feel aimless or even irritating. It's a pretty weak selection. This adventure doesn't feel meaningful. Olimar's only here to pay off a debt, and since his input's relegated to log entries, he doesn't feel very present. He could pretty much be anybody. Since this is a trip of necessity, and the ship's the only thing that talks while out exploring, the adventure feels impersonal, lacking any kind of strong motivation or goal. I appreciate that it's trying something different, but considering how essential the mood is to Pikmin 1's identity, there's no denying how reduced this game can feel in comparison. Number 2, a bare bones overworld. When you think of this series, you probably picture running around giant plants outdoors. Being tiny in a familiar place is fun, but unfortunately, Pikmin 2 is so focused on cave exploration, barely a fourth of your playtime is actually spent in the overworld. It's split into 4 fairly limited environments, each hosting a handful of treasures, entrances to caves, and barely anything else. They're such basic areas they come off as underdeveloped, and very little stands out about them. Even the post-game Wistful Wild is way too simple, and I miss spending time in the more organic locations. If you don't like caves, you'll almost certainly not enjoy Pikmin 2, since they make up so much of this game's content. Number 3, Cave Woes. Caves have issues, and they're almost all related to the randomization. Some setups are so rough, they can feel insurmountable, especially without losing Pikmin, and they're not afraid to take cheap shots either. Enough to the point where I'd even say dirty tactics are overused, especially in the late game caves. They just love dropping stuff on you in an instant. Enemies, rocks, bombs, it happens way too much, and sometimes they're programmed to wait until Pikmin are specifically underneath them to spawn, or for a treasure to just finish being unearthed. The randomization doesn't always play nice with the AI either. Once, after collecting a treasure, the entire group of white Pikmin carrying it ran far away from the ship pod into the middle of the water while the cutscene was still playing, and there wasn't any reason for them to go over there. If I hadn't reacted quickly, they would have all died, and to no fault of my own. Occurrences like this are rare, but I do wonder if caves would be more enjoyable with intentional level design instead. Number 4, Pikmin Hang-Ups. Despite the many improvements to Pikmin, they're still not perfect, but thankfully Thankfully, most of my issues this time aren't about their performance. My biggest gripe is when dismissing them. Very, very often, a single Pikmin will remain in your command after disbanding them. I don't know why this happens, but it's constant, and gets annoying fast. Pikmin sing while you're running around, they even have a special song if you have 20 of each type. But as cute as this is in concept, their noises are grating. They sing way too frequently. It honestly drives me crazy. 100 purple Pikmin are required to lift the dumbbell treasure. This will likely be the last item you collect in a 100% playthrough, since the game doesn't naturally give you enough of them to carry it. You have to actively farm purple Pikmin at some point, which could have been avoided. If I'm not letting my Pikmin die, ideally I wouldn't have to farm a certain type for one of the treasures. Number 5, a few more things. I'm just gonna list these off. The heads-up display is a little overcrowded. Nearly every side of the screen is plastered with something. And these graphics don't need to be this big. A lot more space could be given to the action. The continue from the previous save button, which was on the menu in the Wii version of Pikmin 1, is sadly not present here, and there's still no way to check deaths that happened during the current day in the menu. Last thing is the shoe upgrade, and while this is a nice speed boost for Olimar and the others, the Pikmin get no such upgrade, meaning you'll have to continuously stop moving every few seconds for them to catch up. This is especially unbearable if any of them lack a full blossom. But that's it, we're done. I had a lot to say about this game. Pikmin 2 makes a lot of bold changes from the original. It's surprising just how much it cleans up from its predecessor, offering a far more consistent playing experience. If you're a fan of the outstanding real-time strategy gameplay of Pikmin 1, you'll likely adore the improvements made here. But I absolutely understand if the new tone and overemphasis on caves fails to capture the special feeling present in the original. It's a little hard to say which entry I prefer. They both excel in their own ways. If I had to choose one, I'd probably go with the original Pikmin. The absorbing, emotional angle of that title makes an impression Pikmin 2 doesn't provide or replace. But even with that considered, this is one of the best sequels and GameCube games I've played. Pikmin 2 holds up tremendously well to this day, and proves how much you can flesh out this franchise. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like my videos, subscribe and check out my Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons for your support. I'll see you next time.